It was the easiest choice he ever made, and the last free choice he was allowed to make. His name was Elias Vance, and he worked for the largest defense contractor in the world, Meridian Defense Systems, a company so deeply embedded in the military-industrial complex that it had become almost indistinguishable from government itself. One morning in March, sitting in a server room on the subterranean level of Meridian's headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, he saw something that changed everything. He saw the files. He understood the implications immediately. He knew the risk, but he also knew that what he was looking at represented a violation so profound, a crime so extensive, that it could fundamentally alter the balance of power on an entire continent. He made his decision in the span of approximately 3 seconds. He compressed the data. He uploaded it to a blind server that he had prepared weeks in advance, a server that would route through multiple countries and anonymization layers, making it nearly impossible to trace. And then he walked away from his life. We have spent the last 6 months tracing his movements, tracking the drone technology he exposed, and investigating the international fallout that followed. But we have also been trying to answer one fundamental question: does the truth still matter if the price you pay for revealing it is your life? Elias Vance was 42 years old when he made that choice. He had worked for Meridian for 16 years. He held the highest security clearances available to civilians. He had access to classified information that most governments would kill to obtain. Vance was a computer scientist with degrees from MIT and Stanford. He had worked briefly for the NSA before deciding that government employment was too restrictive for his talents. When Meridian offered him a position in their advanced technology division in 2008, he accepted immediately. The pay was exceptional, the work was classified. The company promised him the opportunity to work on the cutting edge of what they called autonomous systems integration. He signed the necessary paperwork, he underwent the background checks, he was read into the classified programs, and he began working on a project that would fundamentally change his understanding of what his company was capable of doing. The project had no official name. Internally, it was referred to only as Development Matrix 7. In classified documents, it was referred to as the Autonomous Aerial Interdiction and Elimination Platform. To everyone else in the world who would eventually learn about it, it would become known as the Swarm. The Swarm was a drone system unlike anything that had ever been created before. Previous drone programs had relied on human operators who would sit at remote locations, sometimes thousands of miles away, and control an individual drone. That drone would carry weapons, it would locate targets, it would execute strikes, but it would do all of these things under human control. The operator would make the final decision about whether to pull the trigger. That was the law. That was supposedly the ethical boundary that separated targeted strikes from summary executions. Development Matrix 7 was designed to eliminate the human from the equation entirely. The system consisted of multiple autonomous units, generally between 50 and 200 individual drones, operating as a coordinated swarm. These units were equipped with advanced AI that allowed them to communicate with each other, coordinate movement, identify targets independently, and make firing decisions without any human input whatsoever. The system was designed to be deployed in a geographic area, given a mission parameter, and then left to complete that mission with zero human oversight. The drones would identify targets that matched the parameter, they would execute those targets, and they would report back only after the mission was complete. This represented a fundamental shift in autonomous weapon systems. This was not a drone that assisted human operators. This was a system that had eliminated the need for human operators entirely. For the first 7 years, Vance did not think too deeply about what he was creating. He collected his salary, he advanced within the company, he was promoted 3 times, he was given higher security clearances, he was brought into more sensitive aspects of the program, and all the while, Development Matrix 7 was being tested in classified ranges, in remote areas, on targets that could not be discussed outside of secure facilities. The work seemed abstract. It seemed like pure technology. It seemed like something that existed only in controlled environments and classified documents. And then, in January of 2023, everything changed. Vance was brought into a series of meetings at the highest levels of Meridian. They included military personnel, government representatives, officials from the State Department, and individuals who Vance later discovered were CIA operatives. The meetings were about something called the European Integration Protocol. What this protocol represented, Vance gradually came to understand, was a deployment plan. Development Matrix 7 was going to be deployed, not in tests, not in controlled environments, but in actual operational theaters, in real locations on real continents, against real targets. Targets that were described using euphemistic language as nodes of destabilization, infrastructure facilities, and administrative centers. But what Vance understood, as he reviewed the actual target lists, was that many of these targets were civilian locations: schools, hospitals, administrative buildings in cities, power plants, water treatment facilities. This was the moment when Elias Vance began to understand what he had actually been building. For 16 years, he had been creating a weapon system designed to conduct mass autonomous killing operations without any human oversight whatsoever. A system that could identify targets, determine if those targets matched a set of parameters, and execute those targets without any human being making a final decision about whether that execution was justified. A system that could be deployed by one nation against another with plausible deniability, because no human operator could be held responsible. No orders could be traced. No individual had made the decision to kill any specific person. The machine had made all the decisions. In the meetings, Vance voiced his concerns. He raised technical objections. He raised legal objections. He brought up international law. He mentioned the UN Protocol on Weapons. He cited the Geneva Conventions. He argued that this deployment would violate virtually every international agreement governing the use of force. The responses he received were almost contemptuous in their dismissal of his concerns. The lawyers assured him that the system would be operated under rules of engagement that complied with international law. The military officers assured him that the targets had been carefully selected. The government representatives assured him that everything had been cleared with the appropriate oversight bodies. But what Vance understood, in those meetings, was that no one was being honest. The lawyers were concerned with creating a legal framework that would allow the deployment to proceed while maintaining plausible deniability. The military officers were concerned with achieving strategic objectives, and the government representatives were concerned with maintaining the fiction that proper oversight had occurred. Vance returned to his office that evening and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He was going to access the complete file on Development Matrix 7. He was going to download the entire documentation. He was going to copy every memo, every technical specification, every targeting brief, every legal justification, and he was going to give it to the world. The preparation took him 3 weeks. He had to do it carefully. Any sudden downloads, any unusual access patterns would trigger security protocols. So instead, he accessed the files in the normal course of his work. He made small copies. He encrypted them using an algorithm that he had designed himself. He routed the encrypted data through a secure server that he set up using his own resources, outside of any company network. He was methodical. He was careful. He left no digital footprints that could immediately be traced to him. And by the end of March, he had the complete archive of Development Matrix 7. He uploaded the data to a blind server located in Iceland. He used a different encryption key. He left a message explaining what the files contained, and then he sent an anonymized notification to 3 organizations simultaneously: the International Criminal Court, a coalition of human rights organizations, and a journalist named Catherine Mueller, who had been investigating defense contracting abuses for the last 15 years. Then he waited. He went to work. He performed his duties. He acted as though nothing had happened. But he was waiting for the moment when everything would change. The first news story broke on April 7th. Mueller published an article on a major international news outlet outlining the basic facts of Development Matrix 7. She described an autonomous drone swarm system. She described the technical capabilities. She described the planned deployment. She described the potential violations of international law. Within hours, the story went global. Within a day, every major news organization in the world was reporting on it. Meridian denied everything. The company issued statements saying that the allegations were false, that the documents had been fabricated, that the journalist had been duped by foreign disinformation. The government issued similar denials, but Mueller had the evidence. As more of the archive was released, the denials became increasingly implausible. Email chains appeared showing conversations between government officials and Meridian executives discussing the deployment. Classified memos appeared showing that oversight bodies had been intentionally misled about the nature of the system. Budget documents appeared showing the massive financial investment in the program. Within 2 weeks, the entire narrative had collapsed. It was a political earthquake, and it had been triggered by one man's decision to reveal the truth. The consequences were immediate and severe. The European Union launched a formal investigation. The International Criminal Court opened a preliminary examination. Several nations recalled their ambassadors. Economic sanctions were discussed. Stock markets reacted with significant volatility. Meridian's stock price fell by more than 40% in a single week. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The defense secretary resigned. The director of the CIA was placed on administrative leave. The company's defense contracts were suspended. The most advanced autonomous weapons system ever developed was, for all practical purposes, dismantled. Elias Vance watched all of this unfold from his apartment in Arlington. He had not gone to work since the story broke. He knew that Meridian would eventually realize that the leak had come from inside the company. He knew that investigators would begin looking for the source. He knew that his life as he had known it was over, but he had prepared for that. He had saved money. He had obtained false identification documents. He had made arrangements for how he would disappear. And on April 10th, when federal investigators came to his apartment with a warrant to search his computer and his residence, they found him gone. He had left 2 days earlier. What happened to Elias Vance after that is a story that has taken 6 months to reconstruct. We know that he made his way to Canada. We know that he crossed the border using false documents on April 12th. We know that he rented a car in Vancouver. We know that he traveled north into British Columbia, into areas with minimal surveillance and minimal population. Beyond that, the trail becomes much hazier. There are possible sightings of him in Whistler. There is a possible sighting in Prince George. But nothing that is conclusive, nothing that is certain. Either he was very good at hiding, or something had happened to him that made further investigation impossible. What we do know is what happened to the people who were looking for him. 2 weeks after his disappearance, Catherine Muller, the journalist who had published the original story, was involved in what was officially ruled a car accident. Her vehicle went off a highway in upstate New York. She was killed instantly. 2 weeks later, a congressional staffer who had been investigating the scandal was mugged in Washington, D.C. He was killed. Again, no evidence of anything other than a random crime. But the pattern was becoming clear. People who were connected to the Vance leak were dying. Within the next 3 months, 7 people died. A whistleblower from inside the Pentagon, a lawyer who had been advising the ICC investigation, 2 human rights activists, a computer scientist who had been analyzing the leaked files, and 2 congressional staffers. All of them had connections to the leak. All of the deaths were ruled accidents or crimes. None of them were officially connected to each other. But the message was clear. Exposing Development Matrix 7 carried a price, and that price was being collected. Elias Vance, if he was still alive, was presumably aware of this. He was presumably watching the deaths accumulate. He was presumably understanding that by revealing what he had revealed, he had not just destroyed a weapons program. He had made himself the most wanted person in the world by entities that had unlimited resources and no ethical constraints. We attempted to locate him directly. We hired private investigators. We searched databases. We followed possible leads. But every trail went cold. We filed Freedom of Information Act requests with federal agencies. All requests were denied on the grounds of national security. We contacted him through the email address he had used to contact Mueller. No response. We reached out to his family members. His mother said that she had not heard from him since he disappeared, and she was too frightened to say more. The most likely conclusion is that Elias Vance is dead, that sometime in the 4 months after he exposed Development Matrix 7, he was found by someone or some organization with the resources to find him, and that he was eliminated. Whether it was done by a government agency acting in the shadows, or by Meridian Defense Systems using private contractors, or by some combination of state and corporate power, we cannot determine. But the probability that a man who exposed one of the largest weapons development scandals in history, a man who had made himself a target, simply disappeared and stayed disappeared for 6 months, seems extremely low. More likely, he paid the ultimate price for his decision to tell the truth. But what he revealed before he disappeared has fundamentally altered the trajectory of autonomous weapons development globally. The swarm has been exposed. The technology has been examined. The legal and ethical questions surrounding autonomous killing machines have been pushed into the mainstream of global political discourse. International agreements are being negotiated. Nations are committing to moratoriums. The possibility of a future dominated by autonomous weapons systems has been pushed back, at least temporarily. Multiple nations announced that they were halting autonomous weapons development programs. The United Nations convened emergency sessions to discuss autonomous weapons regulation. A global moratorium on autonomous drone swarms was proposed. International courts began preparing indictments against Meridian executives and government officials. Meridian itself filed for bankruptcy protection. Whether it was worth the price that Elias Vance paid for revealing it remains an open question. Whether the truth matters more than the life of the person who reveals it is a question that each of us must answer for ourselves. But what we know is that one man, working alone, armed with nothing but access to information and a moral conviction that what was being hidden could not remain hidden, was willing to sacrifice everything to expose it. And in doing so, he changed the world. Whether he lived to see the consequences of his actions, whether he survived long enough to understand that his sacrifice had prevented a technological catastrophe that could have cost millions of lives, we will probably never know. His name was Elias Vance. He worked for Meridian Defense Systems. He saw something that he could not unknow, and he made a decision that he could not undo. And then he disappeared into history, becoming one more ghost in the machinery of power that few people know about and even fewer are willing to talk about. But his name was Elias Vance. And he mattered.